There, everybody. Patricia Windrow here at the Cable Easel with a program of painting and drawing from life. And this program is going to present a still life brought right into the studio and set up for everyone to see and for me to work from. No copying of photographs or paintings or pictures here. Do it right from life, and then afterwards we eat them. So that's not a bad deal. Here we are. This is a concentration on primary colors. I think that color is one of the things that is most intimidating about painting, and therefore primary colors should be attended to, and they are absolutely wonderful to live with. I have a friend that will have only primary colors in her house, and so her living room has a blue sofa and red pillows and a yellow coffee table and white walls, and it's all extremely happy place. And your mood seems to be very definitely defined by the colors that you surround yourself by. I find that people who want to paint walls black are in severe trouble. So anyway, we have here a study in primary colors. My palette has got a huge puddle of blue in the middle of it because the background is blue, and maybe like Julia Child, during one of the breaks, I'll just paint a lot of the background because there's no point in your watching me paint a flat blue background. But anyway, here is the way you proceed with this rather wonderful array of colors and objects. It's called Summer Harvest. This harvest came actually from my son's garden, which is in Tacoma Park, Washington, near Washington, D.C., Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is in a stone's throw of the nation's capital. And as you can see, there is farming going on just about everywhere. Within a metro ride of the downtown area of Washington, D.C., these prize-winning tomatoes grow in my son's garden. He is a musician who happens to have a hobby of growing plants and food and so on. And these I thought were so remarkably beautiful and such a wonderful looking harvest of colors that this is one of the reasons that I chose this subject matter for today. It is available to everybody, of course. You don't have to have a son that grows vegetables in order to be able to get these things. They're available in these supermarkets that we live with and maybe take for granted. The supermarkets that we have here in this country are genuinely and truly national treasures. There is available year-round the most astonishing array of just about anything you want. Doesn't matter what the weather is elsewhere. Now with this drought out west, we will probably find ourselves having a great deal of expenses that we didn't expect this winter, but nevertheless the variety and the choice is still of wonderful dimensions, and for a painter such as me, I find that I can barely resist painting these still lives. Flowers are of course very seductive, but vegetables and fruits do very much the same thing. There is a wonderful simplicity about these things that I find maybe people don't pay enough attention to when they're looking for subject matters. And so here is just another lesson or suggestion of how you can in fact practice the painting of these shapes. Painting these shapes is just a preamble to painting portraits, because anybody who can paint a tomato with these configurations and these patterns can paint the human face. The trouble, of course, is resemblance. The tomato doesn't care if it looks like itself, but portraits do. Anyway, this is the general layout that I have been, of course, the little cherry tomatoes will go along And I'm actually going to count them this time, because this is a realist painting of real objects, and I want to be perfectly faithful to the subject matter at hand. I'm going to be painting this strictly with a brush. The palette knife thing is wonderful for landscapes, but the brush is, I believe, what has to be done with these. This prize-winning tomato, which my son Mundi called the killer tomato, is going to probably be eaten shortly after this broadcast. I'm sure that's how Cézanne probably warded off the pangs of starvation when he did his wonderful apple pictures. We do, in fact, find ourselves eating the setups when you do still lives. Speaking of Cézanne, maybe the familiarity with Cézanne's name is not altogether worldwide. It should be, because he was one of the great still life painters of the last century and part of this one. And he introduced the interpretive method of painting what had otherwise been strictly and almost a photographic rendering by the Dutch and the British and the Italians, and the Spaniards. But Cézanne decided that he was going to do a more interpretive rendering of these remarkable shapes. And anybody who has the moment can go to the library and find some books on some of Cézanne's still lives. A whole new world will open up about what it is to mean to paint still life. He was extremely brave, and it was absolutely they're wonderful pieces. They've been reproduced, of course, dozens of times, and the reproductions are everywhere, but that's a lesson in itself. Watching me is okay, but thumbing through some of the Cézanne's works, I think you will find extremely helpful. And then you can go on and find the books on the Dutch, who went totally bananas when they painted still lives. They painted them from the cultivated things such as pears and apples and peaches, and then they went off into shells and feathers and jewelry and crockery and silver, and so their still lives gained tremendous amounts of extraneous momentum, and they are a little perplexing, absolutely remarkable to look at, but not as appealing to me as the wonderful spontaneity of Cézanne's works. So much for the little history lesson. As I'm doing this, I'm using a combination of 4 colors. Yellow, vermilion, which is sort of close to spectrum red, alizarin crimson, and white. I like to be able to tell you somewhat of what I'm doing, so that you can actually maybe get some information that you can use yourself later. The mystery of how to mix color, of course, has to be done on an experimental basis with each individual. There are certain things to remember about the opposites, that red is the opposite of green and so forth, and yellow is the opposite of blue. But when you're mixing colors and working from life, you will find yourself being able to decipher these colors by yourself. However, once in a while I like to point out the 4 that I'm using. I have not toned them down with any opposites. I'm using strictly colors because there's such a purity about these, about the colors of this particular piece here, that there's no need to subdue them in any way. I'm going to also tell you that if you observe closely on the still life that you're looking at from the monitor, that there's a lot of yellow in this brilliant red tomato, probably because it's within a few days away of being ripe. The rest of it will turn absolutely brilliant vermilion red in a couple of hours, maybe even. But the need to observe these the color variations is what makes for interest. Otherwise, you turn it into a wallpaper pattern, and nothing wrong with wallpaper patterns, but you don't call that art. You call it a wallpaper pattern. The primary colors play wonderful games with the eye. They also are very easy to live with. They tend to make everything else look particularly crisp and clean. And they are also far easier, and I don't like the word easy when I talk about painting, but they are far easier to work with because they are pure. They can come right out of the tube. As I say, I haven't used any toners in this group here of reds that I'm using for the for the rendering of this tomato. So if anybody is, somebody always says, which is easier? I don't like to really answer the question about what is easy to paint, because I want everybody to understand that painting is difficult, and that if it isn't difficult, then you're not really addressing the problem of putting paint on canvas. It's like any other discipline, it is difficult. So, to switching brushes now. This is the first of 2 half-hour programs of my summer harvest, and the need to attend to details, of course, is always with us. And as you can see, I sit with the still life very close to me, and want to be able to make sure that what I'm seeing is properly rendered for you, the audience, because you may just decide that you want to do exactly what I'm doing. Just go out and either pick your own, if you're growing anything, and you really ought to, because we're living in a climate up here which is wonderful, despite the fact that we need some rain at this point. The introduction of green in here is going to make for the first phase of primary colors. Green, red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors. Anything that comes from there is extra. Green, of course, is the combination of blue and yellow. And who can resist red and green? I mean, there's a time of year when everything turns to red and green. In a few months from now, we'll find red and green just about every place. But here's the wonder of putting red and green together, total opposites. It's very intriguing in the way of a color scheme. I notice here also that I've got a brilliant highlight running down this little vein of tomato right here. And here is the way I do it. 1, 2, 3. There's that nice highlight, which tells you that there is something in there that's extremely smooth. There's another highlight here in that little vein, and there's another one right here on the end of this one. So you don't get this by copying photographs or somebody else's paintings. You have to set it up and see it yourself. And I think that when you do, you'll find yourself totally intrigued by the whole prospect of transferring the third dimension to the second dimension. Here is going to be the first shadow. I've always talked about shadows. Shadows are what anchor objects to their environment. If you don't have a shadow, it's floating free in the air, and it is not what you call realism. If I put this shadow in, you will immediately see, without the rest of the blue background, that the tomato is anchored to the canvas. It also enables me to jump to the next one, which is this wonderful and amazing orange tomato. They come in many colors. When they're not ripe, they're green, and when they're sort of half ripe, they're pink and green, and when they are of a brand called yellow tomatoes, they're yellow. And then somewhere in the middle, some incredible person who crossbreeds these things has made an orange one. They taste exactly like any other tomato, but it just happens to be orange. Who can resist the wonderful tones that these objects are giving me? They yellow and vermilion and white and a little bit of alizarin crimson is what's making this particular piece its color. I'm not using orange from the tube for one excellent reason. I forgot it. However, that should never prevent anybody from doing it. Yellow and red make orange in very interesting tones. But laying this out and selecting this was my idea. You may steal it if you want to. You may go out and get all these wonderful tones and proceed to work up your own composition with these primary colors. I think that you will learn a great deal. I'm shading this now with a touch of purple and some more vermilion so that I give some shape to this otherwise extremely smooth looking object, but it does have its dark side, just like any other rounded shape. And earlier I mentioned the fact that if you can get these shapes with their proper shading, you are just a step away from painting a human cheek or the tip of a human nose or even the eye. And so training is a wonderful thing. If it's self-taught, it becomes even more effective. Here's the highlight on this orange tomato, a little stray one over here. And then inside there is no green. This one happens to still be sort of white and unfinished, but there is a touch of sort of smoky green on the outside of that. I'm going from one to the other because there's a great deal of work to do, and I don't want to linger too long. There's also a strange kind of a break in the skin, which happens through certain weather conditions. My son would probably be able to tell you better how that happens. Extreme dampness and a great deal of overheating caused a little bit of problems in his garden, but nothing that we can't, nothing that he can't live with. I'm going to blend this little highlight here because the sharpness makes it look like a highlight on glass. Okay, I'm going to break now as I am smoothing this out, and I'm going to put a little bit of the blue background in just before while the break is taking place. So don't go too far away. I'll be right back. Well, here we are back again. That wasn't too long, and I have managed to sneak in a little bit of this background, which is all pre-mixed blue. I did it before the show because I can tell you about the colors that I mixed. It's ultramarine, cerulean blue, and a touch of white in the proportion that will give me this royal spectrum primary blue. You can see that it's all working to play the games that these colors play, and I really can't stress too strongly how interesting it is to work with these plain, simple colors, because there is an immediate effect that they will give you. It's also wonderful to frame these things because they'll take very simple framing. Sometimes you need a mat, but I don't think that anybody can really resist the lushness and the richness of these particular tones. I'm going to go on here to the dark side of this a little curvaceous cucumber. My son also puts up a rather impressive mess of pickles, because as anybody who's got a garden growing here on Long Island knows that cucumbers can kind of go out of control. They take over, and if they like what's happening with the season, they will simply overwhelm you, and there aren't enough friends in the world to be able to give enough of these things to. They are so prolific. However, my son has decided that pickles are the answer, and there is a very impressive display of jars of pickles growing on the shelves in his kitchen, which means that there is need for this kind of growing things, because they're so fresh. They come out of the garden so fresh that they pickle better. I think that anybody who's watching this program and has been involved in pickling will agree that the fresher they are, the better. Here is a way of rendering these things. It's very quick, very simple, and very effective. Some of this yellow-green squeezed right out of the tube. These lighter places mixed with a little bit of white, and then the proverbial cucumber dots, or the little spiny things that are sprinkled across this piece of fruit, are the effect comes almost immediately. There is also a sort of a lovely stippled effect of some light color here running up this spine, which of course is a detail which you can't invent and you can't remember. So anybody who says I like to work from memory ought to try working from life and see what great fun it is to be able to discover these things as you go along. The time, of course, flits by, and I'm going to now tell you that the rendering of the yellow tomato is a combination of a great deal of white, more yellow than red, and a nice pure tone. Be sure that that you remember that the purity of these colors is what's going to make this particular composition and this study the most intriguing. I'm hoping that when this picture is over, we'll be able to stand back and hold it behind this still life to see just about how accurate it needed to be. Whatever interpretation took place will make for art as opposed to just a botanical rendering. The pink on this side is a reflection on this very smooth tomato of the brilliant red one, something which is visible only when you are witnessing this from real life. There's a nice pickup of reflection on this brilliant yellow tomato from the huge red prize winner over here on the other side. Oops, goof. Cover that up real quick. There we are. Now, there's a shadow being cast, one of the few shadows on this composition. I'm going to do it with some alizarin crimson, a touch of green, because it's sort of a subdued shadow, but it's the shadow of the green pepper. And the shadow is going to make this give a three-dimensional look about this two-dimensional painting, which is all we are working with here, is 2 dimensions, the flat surface of the canvas. That is the challenge, and that is probably the thing that is the most interesting about painting from life, is to be able to transfer the dimensions. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 finished, not finished, but as close to finishing as I can do on a short space of time, but enough for you to be able to see how actually not having to mix very subtle colors, the use of primary tones is very effective and also very satisfying. You don't have to do anything as this big or this elaborate, but why not? If you have the time and you have the ability to do it big if you want to. This piece is approximately 20 inches long by 12 inches wide, and so much for dimension. I'm going to do the little green fellow in the middle there, because the break was going to be coming pretty soon, and then the next half hour of the part 2 is going to be done exactly the same way, just going from one to the other and trying to accomplish. And if I can accomplish this in this short period of time, certainly anybody who says they don't have the patience to do all this will be able to see that you certainly can devote an hour or so to the realization of doing something as quite as fascinating as this primary color study of something which is available to all of us right here in our very own amazing supermarkets. I believe that there is a little line here that denotes the shape of the way this tomato grows, and maybe another little one here in darker green. Okay, so using this, let me see, where is it? Oh, here. No, it's the other one. Here it is. The other cucumber is a very deep, very dull, and subdued tone of green, not quite as brilliant as the other one. There are different types of cucumbers. So I would say that using a pure sap green on this one right out of the tube, it'll take a while to dry because I'm not using any dryers here, but the pure sap green is a wonderful deep tone and quite rich, and as close to this to the color of this cucumber as I need to get. When I proceed with the other little what I call the small motifs, you will find that these dark areas here are vital to the balance of composition. These nice negative space is as important as positive space, and the dark tones of this cucumber can be referred to probably as almost as negative space, because there is almost no shape to it, but there is interest in the fact that it is lying there. A little bit of paler tone here is going to show you that there is shape, even though the object is extremely dark. There is some shape to it with very little light tone. However, there are those little dots that I call cucumber dots, and they are scattered over the surface of this piece in very small and very repeating patterns, and anybody who knows a cucumber knows that when you're peeling them, they can sometimes be very sharp. However, the need to continue and show you the dark blue shadow of the underneath the yellow tomato is the only step that I'm going to be able to do between now and the end of this program. But as you see, this is building rather rapidly, and fortunately I hope that the interest has been sustained by doing these pieces from one to the other. You don't do it as a whole, you do it as you build the component parts as you go along. And I'm using somewhat of a deepening tone for the shadows underneath these things, because it does get extremely dark under here, and I'm injecting with the ultramarine blue for the shadows a touch of spectrum violet, which is a very brilliant and very dark and very rich color. Underneath the tomato here, I'm putting its shadow, and it casts the shadow because it turns up. It casts a shadow that looks like the prow of a boat, and there is the darkness underneath that one. And then proceeding on to the one in the foreground, it's the same. It is a repetition, and repetition is one of the great learning tools. If you do something over and over again, you find that the lesson is well learned and will stay there for a long time. Just do it over often enough, and it's sort of like second nature. So here are the shapes of these shadows. I've done it many times on this program. And more than likely, because I'm obsessive about doing something probably as well as it can be expected in a short space of time, I like to impart this particular information to you. I'm going to, the second half of this program, another half hour, is going to attempt to go on to the final phase of this still life. And while I'm signing off, I'm going to start the green pepper with some sap green and some yellow green, and then maybe on the program will begin on the second half showing you the shadows and the highlights of this particular object. Well, that's not too bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects at the beginning of a program called Primary Colors or Summer Harvest. Do tune in for the second part. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.